The wind whispered through the narrow streets of Willowbrook, a quiet rural village nestled between rolling green hills. The town, with its winding cobblestone paths and charming lantern-lit porches, had always been a place where everyone knew everyone else. But for Clara Jenkins, the village had grown too quiet. At 65 years old, Clara had once been Willowbrook's beloved schoolteacher, her days filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of companionship. But since her husband, Samuel, had passed 2 winters ago, the house felt hollow, its walls lined with memories that never spoke back. Even the familiar creak of the wooden floorboards beneath her feet seemed louder in the absence of conversation. She spent her evenings curled up in her rocking chair by the window, watching the village lights flicker on, one by one. It was a ritual, one she never missed, no matter how lonely the night felt. But tonight, as rain drummed against the glass, a shadow moved beyond her porch light. At first, she thought it was a bundle of leaves, swept by the wind, until it shivered. A small, gray cat, drenched from the rain, sat hunched at her doorstep. Its thin frame trembled as it stared up at her with wide, piercing green eyes. Clara hesitated for only a second before she opened the door. "Well, aren't you a sorry sight?" she murmured, kneeling down. The cat let out a faint, croaky meow, as if it had spent all its energy just to find her. She sighed, wrapping the tiny creature in her woolen shawl. "Come on in, little one," she whispered, stepping back inside. Little did she know, this cat hadn't come to her by accident. It had a secret. And before long, it would lead Clara to a mystery that would change everything. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the village of Willowbrook wrapped in a blanket of mist. The little gray cat had curled up by the fireplace overnight, his small frame finally warm and dry. Clara watched as he stirred, stretching his slender limbs before flicking his tail and padding toward her. His green eyes studied her with an almost knowing gaze, as if he had chosen her rather than the other way around. "Well, you seem to have made yourself at home," Clara mused, scratching behind his ears. The cat purred softly, leaning into her touch. "Whisper," she decided. "You look like a secret, like something that doesn't make a sound but still leaves ripples." And so, Whisper became part of her life. At first, he was a quiet companion, curling up at her feet when she read and following her around as she tended her small herb garden. But then, strange things started happening. It was small at first, a single wool sock missing from the laundry basket. Then, a knitted scarf disappeared from the coat rack. Clara dismissed it as forgetfulness, until she woke one night to Whisper slipping through the open window, a rolled-up glove clamped in his teeth. She frowned, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Where was he taking these things? Whisper returned before dawn, jumping onto the bed as if nothing had happened. But the next night, he vanished again, and this time, Clara followed. Bundled in her shawl, she crept downstairs and peered through the window. The village was quiet, the street lamps flickering dimly, but there, moving like a shadow through the fog, was Whisper. He slunk between houses, a bundle of fabric dangling from his mouth, disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, as Clara made her usual stop at the local bakery, she overheard the whispers. "Did you hear about Mrs. Holloway's missing socks? And Mr. Peterson's gardening gloves? It's the strangest thing, someone's been sneaking off with all sorts of clothes." Then came the inevitable. "They say it's Clara's cat. Always lurking about at night. Seems suspicious, doesn't it?" Clara felt the weight of curious glances shifting toward her, the town's warmth cooling into weariness. She clutched her basket tighter and hurried home, her heart pounding. What was Whisper doing? And more importantly, why? The storm arrived without warning. Thunder rumbled through Willowbrook, shaking the windows of Clara's cottage as sheets of rain lashed against the rooftops. She sat by the window, watching the street lamps flicker through the downpour, a warm cup of tea cradled in her hands. But something felt off. Whisper wasn't in his usual spot by the fireplace. He was gone again. Clara's chest tightened. The disappearances, the town's murmurs, the way Whisper always returned before dawn, all of it had been leading to something. She could feel it. Then she saw it, a gray blur slipping into the storm, vanishing beyond the garden gate. Without a second thought, Clara threw on her coat, grabbed a lantern, and followed. The rain soaked through her shawl as she trudged through the darkened village, her heart pounding. Whisper moved like a ghost ahead of her, slipping through the tangled underbrush at the town's edge. He was heading into the woods. Clara hesitated. The trees loomed, twisted silhouettes against the stormy sky. But Whisper glanced back at her, his green eyes piercing through the darkness, urging her forward. She swallowed her fear and pressed on. They walked for what felt like an eternity, the wind howling through the trees. Then, she saw it, an abandoned greenhouse, its glass panes cracked and coated in ivy. Whisper darted inside. Clara stepped forward, raising her lantern. The moment she pushed open the rusted door, her breath caught in her throat. In the far corner, huddled among a pile of scarves, socks, and coats, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 6, his frame thin and fragile, his cheeks smeared with dirt. His tiny hands clutched one of Clara's missing scarves, holding it like a lifeline. And Whisper? He curled up beside the boy, pressing his warm body against him, purring softly. The realization hit Clara like a wave. The missing clothes. Whisper hadn't been stealing them. He had been bringing them here, to him. The boy's eyes flickered open, bleary with exhaustion and fear. He shrank back, his breath ragged. "It's okay, sweetheart," Clara whispered, kneeling beside him, her voice thick with emotion. "You're safe now." A beat of silence. Then, in a barely audible whisper, "My name is Leo." Her heart clenched. She reached out, slow and careful. "Leo, honey, how long have you been here?" The boy hesitated before murmuring the words that shattered her heart. "I ran away. I didn't want to go back." Tears burned at the corners of Clara's eyes. Whisper had been protecting him, bringing him warmth, bringing him comfort. And no one, not even Clara, had realized. But now she had. And she wouldn't let him be alone a second longer. She opened her arms. "Come with me, sweetheart. Let's go home." Leo clutched the scarf tighter, then, slowly, crawled into her embrace. Whisper meowed softly, brushing against them both. As Clara lifted Leo into her arms, she whispered back, "You're safe now. I promise." And for the first time in a long, long time, Leo believed it. The storm had faded into a soft drizzle by the time Clara stepped onto her porch. Leo nestled against her shoulder, Whisper trotting close behind. The boy had barely spoken a word on the way back, his small fingers gripping her coat as if letting go would send him back into the cold. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace chased away the chill. Clara knelt beside him, wrapping him in a thick, knitted blanket. His tiny body was trembling, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion and fear. "Let's get you something warm to eat," she said softly, brushing damp curls from his forehead. In the kitchen, she poured him a bowl of hot soup and placed a plate of fresh bread beside it. Leo stared at the food, hesitating, then, with wide, hungry eyes, he picked up a piece and ate in small, careful bites. Whisper curled up beside him, as if to say, "You're safe now." Once Leo had eaten, Clara made the difficult call to the authorities. The woman on the line listened intently as Clara explained how she had found the boy, alone and scared, in the abandoned greenhouse. "We'll send someone first thing in the morning," the officer assured her. By dawn, the news had spread through Willowbrook, but not as whispers of suspicion. Instead, people knocked on Clara's door with blankets, clothes, and warm meals, offering what they could to help the lost boy and the woman who had saved him. For the first time in years, Clara's home was full again, full of kindness, warmth, and the quiet understanding that something special had begun. And at the heart of it all sat Whisper, the cat who had changed everything. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change. Leo, once a quiet shadow of a boy, slowly blossomed in Clara's home. His laughter, hesitant at first, soon filled the halls, turning the house from a place of memories into a place of life again. Whisper never left his side. Whether Leo was curled up with a book, chasing fireflies in the garden, or simply sleeping soundly for the first time in years, the cat was always there, his silent guardian, his first friend. The town of Willowbrook rallied behind them. People who once whispered about Clara's thieving cat now brought gifts for Leo, offering their warmth and support. The woman who had once lived in quiet solitude was now surrounded by a village that cared. And then, one crisp autumn morning, the final piece fell into place. Clara sat in the courthouse, her hands clasped tightly as the judge read through the documents. Leo sat beside her, fidgeting slightly, his small fingers intertwined with hers. At last, the judge smiled. "Congratulations, Miss Jenkins. Leo is officially yours." Clara felt tears sting her eyes as she pulled Leo close, pressing a kiss to his hair. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she whispered. Whisper let out a small, satisfied meow as if he had known, all along, that this was how it was meant to be. Because in the end, his mysterious midnight missions had been more than just a search for warmth. They had led two lost souls home.